Welcome to Deathbed Confessions, where the final truths change everything.
I was 11 years old when my grandfather used his final breath to whisper 7 words that shattered my entire world. "Your father is not your real father." Those were his last words. He looked into my eyes, spoke that truth, and died. No explanation, no context, no chance for me to ask questions or understand what he meant. Just me, an 11-year-old boy, left holding the most devastating secret of my life, while my family grieved around me, completely unaware that everything we thought we knew about our family was a lie. Let me take you back to who I was before that moment, before my grandfather's final words rewrote my entire existence. I was 11, just a normal kid who loved baseball, hated vegetables, and thought I had the best dad in the world. Dad, that's what I called him, was the man who taught me to ride a bike, who never missed a Little League game, who would ruffle my hair and tell me he was proud of me. We had our traditions: Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon football on the couch. He'd let me stay up late sometimes to watch old movies with him, and I'd fall asleep against his shoulder. Mom would find us there in the morning, and she'd smile this soft smile that made our house feel like the safest place in the world. I looked like him. Everyone said so. Same dark hair, same stubborn chin. "You're definitely your father's son," relatives would say, and I'd beam with pride. But there was one person who never said that. One person who would get this strange, pained look in his eyes whenever people talked about how much I resembled my dad. My grandfather, Mom's father. Grandpa had been dying at home for weeks. Cancer had taken everything from him except his determination to die in the house where he'd lived for 40 years, surrounded by the people he loved. Descriptive, intimate. We'd moved his bed into the living room so he could see the garden through the big picture window. Mom said he liked watching the birds at the feeder, but I think he just wanted to keep an eye on all of us, like he was memorizing our faces. I spent hours sitting beside his bed, doing homework, reading to him, or just talking about school. He was still Grandpa, still told terrible jokes that made me groan, still asked about my grades and whether I was being nice to girls. Tone becomes more serious, but that last week, something changed. He kept staring at me with this look I couldn't understand, like he was trying to solve a puzzle, like he was wrestling with something that was eating him alive.
"Closer," he whispered. I leaned in until my ear was almost touching his lips. I could feel how hard it was for him to breathe, how much effort each word was costing him. "Son," he said, and his voice was so quiet I had to hold my breath to hear him. I can't take this with me." I pulled back to look at his face. His eyes were locked on mine with an intensity that made my chest feel tight. "What, Grandpa?" I whispered back. He used what felt like his last bit of strength to pull me close one more time. His grip on my hand was surprisingly strong, desperate. And then, with his final breath, he whispered the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "That man is not your real father." I felt his hand go limp in mine. I sat there, frozen, staring at his face as his eyes slowly closed. The room was suddenly impossibly quiet. No more labored breathing, no more whispered words. He was gone. "Mom!" I called out, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. "Mom!" I heard her running from the kitchen, heard Dad's chair creak as he stood up. But I couldn't move. I couldn't process what had just happened. "What is it? What's wrong?" She took one look at Grandpa's still face and knew. She sank to her knees beside the bed, taking his other hand, checking for a pulse she knew she wouldn't find. "He's gone, isn't he?" And there I was, 11 years old, watching my family grieve while his last words echoed in my head like a scream I couldn't silence. Your father is not your real father.
The next few days were a blur of funeral arrangements, casseroles from neighbors, and relatives I barely knew telling me how sorry they were for my loss. But the hardest part wasn't the grief, it was the secret. Every time someone hugged me and said, "Your grandfather loved you so much," I wanted to scream. Because, yes, he loved me. He loved me enough to use his dying breath to tell me the truth that everyone else had been hiding. I sat through the funeral service, watching person after person get up to talk about what a good man my grandfather was, how honest he was, how he always spoke the truth. And all I could think was, he told me the truth, and now he's gone, and I'm the only one who knows. I studied every face at that funeral. Did Mom know? Did Dad know? Did any of these relatives know that I wasn't who they thought I was? But the worst part was the ride home. I was sitting in the back seat, staring out the window, when Dad caught my eyes in the rearview mirror. "You okay, champ? You've been really quiet since..." Champ. He called me champ. Was that what you called a kid who wasn't really yours? Or did he not know either? I wanted to tell him. I wanted to ask him if he knew. But how do you ask the only father you've ever known if he's actually your father? So I lied. Just like everyone else had apparently been lying to me my entire life. "I'm just sad about Grandpa," I said. But I wasn't just sad. I was lost. I was confused. I was carrying a secret that felt like it was going to kill me. The weeks that followed were like living in a nightmare where everything looked normal but nothing was real. I became obsessed with studying my reflection. Did I really look like Dad? Or had I just been told I did so many times that I'd started to believe it? I watched my parents differently. Every conversation felt loaded with hidden meaning. Every family photo looked like a lie. And the questions. Oh God, the questions that kept me awake at night. Who was my real father? Why had Mom lied to me? Did Dad know he wasn't my biological father? If he did know, why did he stay? If he didn't know, was I supposed to tell him? But the question that haunted me most, the one that made my chest feel tight every time I thought about it. If the man I thought was my father wasn't really my father, then who was I? Grandpa had given me this devastating truth, but he'd taken all the context with him to his grave. I was left with the worst kind of puzzle, one missing all the pieces that would help it make sense. It took me 4 months to work up the courage to confront my mother. 4 months of watching her, studying her face, looking for cracks in the facade. I finally cornered her on a Saturday afternoon when Dad was at the hardware store. She was in the kitchen making cookies, chocolate chip my favorite, and for a moment everything felt normal. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't carry this secret alone for another day. "Mom," I said, climbing onto the counter stool, "I need to ask you something." "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath and said the words that would change everything. When Grandpa died, he told me something. He said Dad isn't my real father. The mixing bowl slipped from her hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. Cookie dough and ceramic pieces scattered everywhere, but she didn't move to clean it up. She just stared at me, her face going white as she slowly sank into the chair across from me. "Oh my God," she whispered. Those were his last words, weren't they? And that's when I knew. Everything Grandpa had told me was true. But what my mother told me next about who my real father was and how I came to exist, that revelation would make my grandfather's deathbed confession look like a gentle whisper compared to the scream of truth that was about to destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. Because you see, the man who was my biological father wasn't just a stranger. He wasn't just someone my mother had loved and lost. The truth about my conception was tied to the darkest, most violent moment of my mother's life, a moment so traumatic that she'd built an entire false reality around it just to survive. And when she finally told me the whole truth about who I really was and how I came to exist, it would explain everything. Why she'd hidden the truth for so long. Why she'd been so desperate to create a different story. Why she'd needed Dad to be my father even if biology said otherwise. But it would also reveal something even more sinister. Something that would make me question not just my identity, but whether the man I'd been calling Dad my entire life was actually the monster responsible for the worst night of my mother's life. You see, my grandfather didn't just tell me that my dad wasn't my real father. He'd started a chain of revelations that would prove that sometimes the people you trust most are the ones capable of the most unthinkable betrayals. And that's a truth that would destroy more than just my sense of identity. It would destroy my family entirely. If you've made it this far, thank you for sitting with me through the hardest moment of my childhood, for feeling the weight of carrying a secret that no 11-year-old should have to bear. If you want to hear what my mother told me about my real father, and why that revelation was even more devastating than my grandfather's final words, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because some deathbed confessions don't just reveal secrets, they reveal horrors. And some truths are so dark that they change not just who you think you are, but also who you can trust.